When you start the software, you should hold down Shift, Option, and Command key at the same time, 3 of them. Shift, Option, and Command. And if you click to start the Photoshop, you should see this warning window. That means you successfully pushed down the right key, Shift, Option, and Command. It's asking you to delete Adobe Photoshop setting files and then make it all back to default. And especially this is useful when you are learning the software so that everything won't get jumbled around and comes out in the way that is the factory default. If you see this, you can just go ahead and say yes to it. And then window opens.
If you don't see it, does that mean it's already been done?
Probably.
Okay.
Or this may be the first time it was opened.
Okay.
Yeah. And then in here, if you like to make it to a full screen, you don't want to see anything in the background, you can click onto this green button, click, and then it fills to a full screen. This is what I usually say. At the top, you see Photoshop CC, File, Edit, Image, Layer, Type, Select, Filter, 3D, View, Window, and Help, right? So those things, I call it top menu. So if I instruct you to go to, from the top menu, go to File, then you look at the top part and go to File. From the top menu, go to Select. From the top menu, go to Filter. So these are top menu here, right? So I'm just basically showing you the interface of Photoshop. On the left side, you see a toolbox. The little things. I'm going to zoom in. You don't have to zoom in. The toolbox. If you click onto this little arrow, then it becomes double, or all the way into the one column or 2 columns. It doesn't matter which one. There are some more tools hidden behind this 3 ... mark. If you click onto that, edit toolbar, and there are lots of things hidden behind it too. I wouldn't edit the toolbar. I'm going to just say cancel, but I just wanted to show you what's behind it. If you right click onto this, oh, it's the same thing actually, sorry. If you look through the tools, there is this little triangle, and if you right click, means that this tool is not only a move tool, but something hidden behind it. And here, if I right click on it, lasso tool, polygonal lasso tool, magnetic lasso tool, so there are more things hidden behind it too. Right click, and there are lots of things. Right click the each, and then there are things hidden behind it, right? Also, at the same time, I would like you to notice as you click onto different tools, this top part right below the red and yellow and green button changes. Do you see? It changes depending on the tool of your selection. Do you see that? This part is a tool option. So this area is an option for certain tools. Option for move tool is different from option for brush tool. And these days it has this cool animation of showing you what they are too. Like option of clone stump tool is different from other tools. So the option changes as you choose different tools. Okay. All the tools here, the palettes, different palettes are available in the right side. This palette settings depends on the purpose of your use of Photoshop. If you click onto the top right side, you see this little rectangle mark. If you click right next to the triangle of this rectangle, then you can see different workspace set. If you're primarily doing 3D or graphic and web design, motion, depending on the use, it changes the workspace, you can see, right? This class is geared towards photographers. So we're going to use photography. And this is what I'm going to ask you usually when I do a demonstration. Go to a workspace and set your workspace to photography so everyone has a same workspace. Maybe, and if you pull these things, you can get really messy too, by the way. Like here, right? And in these things, you can change the size too. And this is crazy, actually. I've never really seen it this way, but sometimes some settings get really crazy, even though you go to photography workspace, because somebody who used the computer previously got it that way. You can quickly make the workspace clean by reset photography. Why don't you just pull out all those things and get it messy once? See what you can do. You can even close some of the settings by clicking the X. You can change the size of it. And then let's bring it to a clean workspace. Reset photography. Experiment and then kind of looking around, clicking around is probably a good thing when you're learning. Nothing wouldn't really easily break, actually. One thing that could happen to you that makes you sad is if you work on images for a long time, like few hours, and computer decided to quit. And then you don't have a copy, the saved copy. So save or save as is a good idea. Okay. All right. So this is the workspace. You don't have to follow, but just take a look at this. If you go to Photoshop and preferences, there are a lot of preference settings. I'm going to go to Photoshop from the top menu, preferences, and general. And there are lots and lots of preferences settings. You don't have to know every single thing. I actually don't know every single thing. But few things that is very important. Especially if you are new to Photoshop, I recommend you to look into history log. History log. And under history log, I click to activate the history log. What is this? Basically, every single move that you make in Photoshop would be recorded as a metadata. And I would actually go to detailed. So things that you do will be recorded as a metadata. And if something really mysterious thing happens and then you don't know exactly what happens, I can take a look at the history log and use it as a clue to figure out what might have happened. This settings, by the way, is used for forensic photographers, where, well, they get a print of fingerprints, all the evidence, right? And they clean it and they create certain kind of contrast to make it more visible, like fingerprints and stuff. But this history log becomes really important when they go to court. They submit those history log to make sure that no unnecessary manipulation is added to change the evidence. So this is used for that kind of purpose, but for the class purpose, not necessarily the forensic purpose, but trying to figure out what exactly happened could be helpful too. So history log, set it to metadata, so it's saved it to metadata, and set it to edit log items detailed so that you can take a look. I can take a look at the detailed log. Another thing I should tell you is every time you do a default starting computer with Shift, Option, and Command, remember that open dialog saying you'd like to clean the settings, right? This would be resetted to not to record the history. So you would like to go to Preference Settings. Every time if you push that 3 button of Shift, Option, and Command, you should go to Preferences, go to History Log, and click onto History Log, Metadata, and Detailed. Okay? So once you get comfortable with the software, and then if you feel it is not necessary, you don't have to do this. It's just for me to figure out in case if something happens. Okay? Other place, performance and scratch disks. Depending on, in this computer lab, we will manage this part, but at home, if you experience the slowness of the computer, you would like to look into this memory usage and cache usage, the history settings, and so on in here too. You can actually set the history of what you have done to like 1000 or something. Yeah. But if you task your Photoshop to remember 1000 things, the previous things, it uses a lot of memory and it slows down. So you should have it, yeah, it was default 50. Used to be default 20. But 50 probably is a good thing, but you can change that history status. If you are if you are used to Lightroom, by the way, and Lightroom remembers all the things that you have done, right? Photoshop, however, once you save and close the file, that history is gone. So remember that Photoshop wouldn't remember this history steps once you save it and then close the software. So you kind of have to remember it in your head what you have done.
So if you save and don't close, it'll still remember.
Well, I would say, okay, the changes to the file will be saved, right? Changes to the file would be saved. If your picture, if you have a picture that was color and convert it to black and white and save and close. Now, next time when you open, it's going to be black and white, but it won't remember how you convert it to black and white.
So even if the history is 50, those 50 keystrokes won't be there.
Won't be there once you close the software and once you close the file.
But what
Is
if
there no way to save it?
What about you do that save as, but then you get that?
No, the history status is not going to be saved. File itself is going to be saved, no problem.
How about the layers?
Layer will be saved. Will be saved unless you save it as JPEG. JPEG file will flatten it. Yes?
okay, but
Is the main purpose of this for like mistakes? Like if you did a mistake like 4 keystrokes ago and you want to go back to the original keystroke, you would do that?
Yeah, right. So, what's your name again?
Alvaro?
Alvaro.
Yeah.
Alvaro.
It's a Spanish name. A lot of people don't get it.
Okay, well, I will get it soon. Alvaro. Yes, when you have a picture of a file open,
Yeah.
and if you like to go back to 4 brush strokes back, then you can do that. But once you save it and then close the file and reopen the file, you cannot go back to that 4 brush strokes.
Yeah.
But it remembers the last state before you save the file.
but if you save it and don't close it, you still can go back.
Yes.
Okay.
So closing or not closing, that's basically a key part. But you would like to close it eventually. So it's just a different mental set. And not being able to go back is not a bad thing actually. Because in Photoshop, we use layers. And layer will make it non-destructive. Another thing, non-destructive is the key here too. If you start to add colors directly to a base layer or just one picture, then that's a problem. If you start to write things directly to this picture, then there is, and if you save it and then close it, there is no way to go back to that. But if you have a layer, I hope this is, I wish this is transparent. But if you have a layer on top of the base and then start writing on top of this one, then all you need to do is to cross this and then you have a original. So it's non-destructive. So not having the history status isn't that a problem. Okay. So in here, depending on your use of computers and images, you can change this cache level, which is the temporal a memory usage, and you can improve the performance of the computer too. If you feel that your computer is really slow and giving you a hard time. Really slow meaning that if you're trying to say, do one stroke or do some adjustment and it takes you 3 or 5 minutes to complete the task, that's slow. Okay. So Right now, it's set to default, and this is probably a good starting point. But if you start to have a large files, then a huge pixel dimension could be helpful here. Huge pixel dimension. If you are a web designer or primarily using really small files, JPEG files and stuff, then web, that is probably what you like to do, but currently set to default. And those explanation, you can read it down here too. Here also the use of memory. The ideal range is indicated, and I'm mostly used up to ideal range. But if you like to increase the use of memory a little bit more, to allocate more memory to Photoshop, I can do that too. You can do that at home. Scratch disk, that's another one. Again, it's a performance issue. If your computer is experiencing a slowness, then the scratch disk, right now, I don't have anything connected to my computer, but using the scratch disk, that's a temporal memory space, assigned to a base, the computer is not a good idea. If you have a secondary hard drive like your hard drive, and you assign this temporary external hard drive as a scratch disk, that could sometimes solve the performance issue as well too, instead of using the computer hard drive itself. So those three things: performance, scratch disk, and then also history log. Other things, you can just kind of look through them at home. Please do not do that here, but at home. And if you have any questions, I can probably answer some of the questions. Okay? I'll say okay. Everything that is changed in a preference will take an account next time when you're launching the computer and the software. So this time it's not really changing anything. Okay? Questions? We have 40 minutes. Let's do some silly exercise then.